The Pensacola Monster. Let me tell you about one of the first ever truly terrifying stories I've ever heard. It's one of those stories that makes you question the nature of reality in which you live. And yet, it is another one of those stories where the authorities have agreed upon an official explanation that makes the story told by the surviving witness sound absurd, like make-believe or hallucination. But for Edward Brian McCleary, it was a traumatizing experience. McCleary lost 4 friends in one terrifying night. On Sunday, March 25, 1962, a search team found young McCleary unconscious on the beach of Pensacola Bay. They roused him and tended to his condition. His story was so fantastic that they concluded that he must have inhaled large amounts of methane gas that caused him to hallucinate. The things that he said he witnessed couldn't possibly be true. McCleary reminisced about the day before, the perfect day to go out with his friends on a skin diving trip in the Pensacola Bay. His friends were Warren Sally, Bradford Rice, Eric Reel, and Larry Stewart Bill. It was a fairly routine trip they had planned. Travel out to the bay, set out on a raft, find some nice clear water, and explore the beauty of its depths. In fact, they had found a spot where they could see down about 40 feet into the water. Edward McCleary remembered looking down and thinking that it was perfect. But they ran into a problem. The raft stopped moving. A few of them jumped out of the raft and tried to push it out of its rut. No luck. They saw a nearby boat heading back to shore. They shouted and even created a makeshift distress signal to try and get its attention, to no avail. They were quickly losing hope, and a storm was rolling in. They feared that they would be lost at sea and everyone would drown. Like the scene of a scary movie, a cloud of fog came around their raft, making visibility nearly impossible. They sat in darkness, not knowing what lurked just outside of their sight. It all began with a putrid smell, as many of these incidents do. Then they heard what sounded like a whining noise. They could hear that something was pushing through the water, maybe bobbing up and down as it approached. Finally, they saw it. 30 years prior to this encounter, a famous photo was taken of Nessie, what would come to be known as the surgeon photo. This was the clearest photo and best evidence for the existence of the Loch Ness Monster, as well as proof positive that Nessie was a surviving descendant of some kind of plesiosaur. For many years, the photo was believed to be authentic. That is, until the people who took the photo confessed that it was a hoax. They even revealed how they faked the photo and informed others how they could recreate it. It was quickly realized that such a photo was easy to fake. What wasn't easy to fake, or to understand, was this beast that was before these 5 boys. Edward described its neck as being like a telephone pole. His drawings afterwards somewhat resembled the creature in the famed surgeon photo from 1932. It would have been awe-inspiring had the creature not continued to approach the raft. Its approach was predatory. Whatever its motivations were, it was clear that it would attack. The boys knew that they were doomed no matter what they did. The storm had arrived, the waters were getting rough, the water was freezing, and they were lost. However, facing these elements was a chance. The impending doom this monster brought was inevitable. So they took drastic action. They abandoned ship, diving into the cold Gulf, and started swimming frantically away from the creature. Immediately after jumping from the raft, the monster's jaws plunged into it. By this time, the boys had escaped. Yet all of the cards were stacked against them. They were in the fog, in a storm, and they didn't know where they were. To make matters worse, they heard screams of terror accompanied by the words, "It got him!" Edward swam for all his life was worth, not believing he could make it back to shore. At this point, Eric was still with Edward. They called out to their friends and realized that one by one they were being picked off. None of the 3 were with them. Edward swam and swam when all of a sudden he came across what might become good fortune, an underwater current. If only this current led to land, he could make it out of this ordeal alive. Edward looked back and Eric was gone. It was now just him and the beast. but the current might at least help him to avoid the grisly fate of ending up in the teeth of this heinous beast. Edward swam with the current until he could swim no more. Eventually, he would lose consciousness and be recovered by this search team. The official story was that Edward had hallucinated. The monster was nothing more than an image that his mind imposed of a cartoon sea serpent that was popular in children's TV shows back then. His friends probably just got taken out by sea and drowned. In fact, the body of Brad Rice was recovered, and there was no sign of an animal attack. All of the evidence was matching up perfectly with this narrative that there was no monster. Edward and his friends probably just got spooked when they saw a whale skimming the top of the water while seeking for food. The problem was that Edward recalls the authorities telling him not to talk about the sea serpent. Furthermore, Brad's body was the only one of the three to be recovered. No one knows the true fate of the other three boys. It is not easy to know what happened on March 24th, 1962 in the Bay of Pensacola. What we do know was that it was bad enough to leave a lasting impression with Edward Brian McCleary. He wrote about this encounter in length, and never did he stop believing in what he saw that day.